Hello, everyone. I'm pleased this afternoon to have with me Dr. Harry Cummings. And Harry, many of you will know for his long-term affiliation with the Rural Planning and Development Program at the University of Guelph. And we'll also, Harry, introduce your dog that you have with you there today.
Yes, she's wanting my attention, and I'm giving you my attention. So there we go.
Well, it'll add a little humor to it all, I'm sure, throughout. But just thrilled that you're able to join us today and share a few of your reflections from back in the day when you first joined Rural Planning and Development and throughout the years with the program. So I know when you first came to the school, you were associated, or I'm not sure if it happened before or shortly thereafter, but the Sulawesi project. Maybe tell us a little bit about that and where you came from before you got to the program at Guelph.
Yeah, sure. So one of the unique things about my time at the school was actually there were three of us all born in the same year, virtually the same month. John Fitzgibbon, Brooke Afshar, and Harry Cummings, all of the same age and very close to the same birth period. So we those three of us certainly shared a bunch of stuff. Prior to coming to Guelph, immediately prior, I was working as a. I'm going to put my dog away. Okay?
All right, I'll just put this in pause for a second. Great, I've just restarted the recording. So.
Yeah. So I came to Guelph from Edmonton, where I actually worked for David Douglas in Woods Gordon Management Consulting, and did a whole bunch of work on Aboriginal, Métis Association of Alberta, Province of Alberta, a variety of stuff, and was finished off my application to the Canadian Institute of Planners, the application for qualifications as a registered professional planner. I actually wrote that test and was interviewed just prior to my application at Guelph as well. But yeah, I was in Alberta just before coming to Guelph, and just prior to that, I had been in Indonesia running a project which the University of British Columbia actually had obtained the contract for. I was hired by them to run a project eventually, and so I spent about 3 years in Indonesia, sort of a regional development plan for one of the islands in Indonesia, and after that was over, I came back to Edmonton and then on to Guelph.
And you were one of the very first hires, weren't you, Harry?
I was early in the time. Yeah, John Fitzgibbon was there already. John Fitzsimons was around. Mark Lapping, of course. Tony. Tony, Mark, John Fitzsimons, John Fitzgibbon were already. George Penfold were there ahead of me, actually. I believe. So I was one of the fifth or sixth on.
Okay.
In line prior to Don Reed.
Okay.
I think Don came shortly thereafter.
Okay. And I know, again, just going back to the Sulawesi project, because one of the things that the school has done over the decades is done planning here in Canada, domestic, as we sometimes refer to it, and international planning and development. And I've always admired your work, Harry, because it spans both. And I know with the Sulawesi project in particular, I think I've heard you say in the past, it was the largest project, international development project that the university had and maybe has ever had.
That's right. It remains ever had. It was approximately 50 million in value, with over $1 million a year in overhead coming into the university coffers at the time. And a bunch of people, John Fitzgibbon, and then a couple of geographers, Barry Smith and Alan Joseph, did work for us there. David Douglas did some work as well. Al Dyer did some work on the project on on technology kinds of stuff as well. So I did what I could to try to bring Guelph people to it. And then I did about a total of, there were kind of close to 10 theses done by Guelph students with Sulawesi as the topic as well. So, and then some of those people ended up working for me on the Sulawesi project. Mary Coyle would be an example.
Yes.
And well, there certainly were certainly other people who joined after having finished degrees at Guelph.
And what are some of your early memories of the time at Guelph, Harry, when you first arrived, and stepping into a situation where a new program, new school being set up? I'm sure it was both a fascinating and it's a bit of a scary time, perhaps, in some ways.
Well, I mean, I was very struck by the idea of trying to provide an interdisciplinary program, although we, to some degree, were frustrated by the governance at Guelph, which had us under, well, initially we were under the vice president, and then subsequently we got moved into the college. But in neither case could the real interdisciplinary perspective of the school was hard to fit to some degree in a university environment where specialization was rewarded. In my view, that school faculty were competent, in a variety of areas, and not so much specialists as good generalist planners, so to speak. So I was impressed by that. I love the idea of the mandate for community service, teaching, and publication. So the community service side was given a lot of respect within the department, and that certainly made it easy for me in the kind of work that I did. I mean, the Sulawesi Indonesian project is a good example of community engagement in the international context, but we did lots of stuff at home. At home meaning in Ontario or in Canada. In fact, Kellogg project, I think, was just wrapping up. Tony Fuller had previously brought to Guelph. It wrapped up, I think, just prior to my arrival, but there was still lots of buzz in the hallway about the Kellogg project and that particular kind of work that I think John Fitzsimons and Tony were both involved in. I don't know who all.
Jackie Wolf, I believe.
Jackie Wolf, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it was a big outreach project that told me that outreach was valued by my department and the university.
Just reflecting back on some of those early years, of course, students coming from different things. What was attracting students back then? Because there's no established program per se, like there's no track record. What led students to come into the program, as you recall?
Well, I think just the fact that we were to some degree unique in occupying the space of rural planning development. There weren't very many places in the world. Rural planning and development was at the top of the list. And in fact, interestingly enough, in the first year or two, I ended up supervising 2 or 3 students, international students. Although my hiring was very clearly about domestic, I had to make sure that my material was prepared for an audience which was going to be for Canadian planners. But when I got to Guelph, I found out that a bunch of people were being admitted with international credentials. One of my first supervisions was a Brazilian, I can't remember his name, but who did some stuff on urbanization under my supervision.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was just going to say that, though, as you give that example, we often think of the outreach within Canada, but the dozens upon dozens of students that have come from international locations and gone through the program in one way or the other.
Yeah, for sure. And we don't hear from them probably as much as we do hear from our Canadian students.
Yeah.
So the challenge of doing good interdisciplinary work in the university environment was probably to some degree a preoccupation for me. Of course, getting good courses and doing good teaching was at the top of the list as well. So we seem to, the university and the department seem to have ongoing links with communities in Southern Ontario and elsewhere in Canada, and that made doing that work easier because there were links already established through people like Tony Fuller and the Kellogg Foundation. And a group of faculty who had come to the department with prior experience. Right? So both faculty brought with them their contacts. And of course, you had a dynamic director in Mark Lapping out there leading the charge. Those are some of the highlights of my early days at Guelph.
Yeah, indeed. And so now that if we look back in time, with the benefit of the 40 years of the program having been up in existence, what do you think RPD has meant to community, to people, to the planning profession, the development side of things? Any reflections on that?
Well, I like to think it still is the home for rural in the planning world. I think others have tried to occupy the space, but I think we've done it as successfully as anybody. I hope that the program would continue to occupy that space. At the time I was hired, I remember George Brinkman was on the hiring committee from Ag Economics. And one of the questions I was asked the time I was hired was, is rural still relevant, right? Society. That was one of the questions I was asked her. And yes, it's still relevant today. It remained relevant throughout. It was a niche which we occupied and occupy, which is a very important perspective on Canadian society. And as Canadians, we can learn from what's happening in rural areas and know that it's not the same thing as that which is happening in our cities. Even though our cities are growing rapidly and increasing proportion of the population, of course, but in terms of land use, I mean, as I said to you earlier, I was down into Norfolk County today talking to greenhouse operators and remarking on the wonderful agricultural landscape which Southern Ontario is, right? So today is a drizzly, wet day, but the countryside remains beautiful. Very agrarian in nature. So rural dominates in terms of countryside in this country.
Yes.
The population may not be it, but in terms of impact on society, rural is proportionally influential compared to its population.
Indeed. So if we were to project out for the next 40 years, what do you think are some of the challenges that we might face as we look forward to that future?
Well, I think probably all of us who are into societal issues are concerned about what's happening with respect to the environment and climate change, right? I heard somebody else today, I'm an avid CBC radio listener, talking about, I think she said something effective. I thought climate change was hopeless until it could. Then I saw quickly the world rose to a challenge. chose to work together to a challenge which presented itself, we could do it on climate change if we decided to do it. We just haven't given it the importance. Maybe as environmental disasters appear to occur more frequently, maybe as a society we will finally get to the point of really making it the priority it should be. So, and of course, is out there. Environmental goods and services, rural countryside plays such an important part in our environment. And I think we have always, in the department, we've always paid attention to that. I remember being impressed by Stu Hiltz's work on conservation agreements, farm stewardship agreements put in place with farmers across Ontario. And the focus there was on maintaining land uses which were likely to promote good water quality and respect environmental stewardship. And I think across the program that the faculty continued to promote those kinds of ideas, and that we were able to do it because we were not stuck in our discipline in that sense. We were dealing with societal issues more generally, applying a rural lens, but dealing with societal issues more generally. Those were things I was excited about. Fortunately, I remain excited by those things, and hoping that we as a society can find our way around this climate change environmental issue before we do ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just to reflect in this time and space when we're still in dealing with COVID and what that has meant, and to a degree at least how society responded for a while, and one hopes that there's the possibility of some change, if you like, in the way we behave as it relates to climate change too, and as you say, be able to deal with it and resolve it in a way that leaves things optimistic for future generations, if we can get to that
For
point.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I mean, I think rural will remain relevant. So the challenge for us is to make sure we bring that to the top of the agenda, so that it's not an afterthought, that it's an integral part of planning and development in the Canadian context, both at all levels of government, national, provincial, and municipal. And the challenges keep occurring, right? There will always be rural urban fringes where planners who have a good sense of what rural is about are very important contributors to making good planning decisions.
I think just as you're saying that, going through my mind is one of the things that I think the school has and the program has always done well, which is to embrace a broad definition of planning, that it's not just about that regulatory side of things, although that is important, but it's also about development and communities that aren't experiencing population growth. And I think that embracing that broad definition has served the program and rural communities and planners who've had our training well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If just thinking of that future again, you mentioned climate change as an idea, or not an idea, like as an absolute concern. I know you've done work with Indigenous communities as well, and I think that's a key item for us to figure out how to do that well into the future.
Yeah, for sure. I remain involved in the Canadian Evaluation Society. I'm currently treasurer and the past president. And we've tried to embrace truth and reconciliation in a real sense, in that board members and programming. And yeah, our programming courses, our volunteer recruitment has actively promoted Indigenous kinds of issues. In fact, we established an international study group with an Indigenous focus as part of the evaluation community that was established by one of our members of Indigenous background. We've adjusted. We've put an Indigenous focus on a number of courses we offer. We offer an evaluation essential skills course. So we've adjusted that course to include more Indigenous kinds of issues. For sure, I mean, it's been an interesting world out there. Indigenous, gender, racial, all those kinds of issues have become more important themes. It appears to me in the last 5 years, those issues have become more important in society's agenda than they were in the past. Where that's going to lead us, it appears we haven't got as far on the Indigenous issue as we should have, perhaps could have. And I'm just not sure where that's gonna, when we're gonna get there and what that looks like. Meantime, I guess I'm listening and learning, I hope.
Pardon me, Harry?
I'm listening and learning.
Indeed, yeah.
In the meantime.
I can reflect on what I see are some hopeful signs in the profession, trying to be more aware of the needs of Indigenous communities and building more capacity to deal with Indigenous issues at a professional basis. But perhaps most important of all is trying to, and I'm reflecting of all of the students that have gone through the program that, in your many years, Harry, as grad coordinator, that had an interest in Indigenous communities. And I have a sense that there's folks out there trying to do well by the topic, trying to make improvements. So, I see that as something that the school has also contributed to over time.
Yeah, we've actually, we graduated a number of students of Indigenous background, and our graduates have gone into programming, working in Ottawa with what used to be Indian Affairs and on the Indigenous file. Actually, this week I just heard John Gowdy, one of our graduates, do an interview in Labrador with local people on the Indigenous agenda as well. So our graduates have moved across the country. Melanie Parody, Miss Melanie Parody.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Was involved in the Métis agenda, Métis Ontario for a while. Karen Smith is actually working with me. She was one of our students as well, and is from Six Nations. Yes, so I think, Jackie taught a course on these issues for a while. I don't know what you're doing currently, but it seems to me we should make sure that our teaching, I'm not sure that my teaching reflected an Indigenous element as much as it should have. Except perhaps maybe in evaluation, I was able to reach out in some of the material, but I'm not sure that in research methods or community economic development, that I embraced Indigenous as much as I should have.
Well, I think just looking at the great work that Professor Sherry Longboat is now doing in the school, in the program, and an Indigenous scholar doing some fantastic work. And with community, but also with water resource issues and so on as well. And I know that that's an opportunity that our current students have. She offers 2 courses that contribute to that positively. Just as I perhaps move towards conclusion here, I'm sure former students will be keen to hear what you're up to these days, and anything you would like to say to those former students.
Well, I'd like to say that the rural planning, I hope the rural planning education which students receive adequately prepared them for diverse careers. I sort of think I see that in the jobs that they've occupied. I'm so very proud of that, the generalist, diverse approach to education which we took at the school. And in terms of, I certainly have had many students reach out to me over the years with respect to things they learned in the program that they continue to draw on and are appreciative of. In terms of my own life, I have maintained my consulting company through Harry Cummings and Associates, and currently employ a team which is 100% graduates of rural planning and development. So I guess I believe in the product.
Oh.
I have found our students to be very adaptable, flexible, bright, hardworking, applied researchers that do good evaluation and lots of other good work. All the way from, we're doing a national study for the Canadian organic growers on this optimizing supply chains for organic products in Canada, for field peas, blueberries, beef, carrots, field greens. So that certainly fits in the rural and agricultural agenda that we all talk about. At the other end of the scale, I just finished a major study in Mali for Right to Play on education agendas and child labor, trying to reduce child labor for particular girls and others in the mining industry in Mali, and also to deal with issues of gender bias that exist and the negative impacts of development and other parts of life on young women. Just expose myself to gender-based analysis, plus hopefully continuing to grow and learn, but also talking about agriculture in Norwich County and how to work with the local municipal planners on those kinds of issues. So I remain proud of rural planning development as a diverse and appropriate background for the exploration of a variety of important societal issues. And I see that in my students, and I'm trying to contribute in my work, and I see lots of future for that.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm just reflecting on that domestic element of your work, Harry, and the ongoing work internationally as well that has contributed in so many ways.
Yes, I've struggled over the years to try to find that balance, because it's so easy to say, oh, you're only do international, so you're not appropriate for domestic, or vice versa, that the international people don't see your domestic work as being relevant. I've been lucky enough to be able to balance the two to some degree, and hopefully we'll continue to do that.
Yeah. I should also just, before we conclude, point out that you were the grad coordinator, Harry. Was it for 12 or 13 years?
12 years, I think.
12 years. And just, I having served that role myself at one point for a relatively short period of time, I know how much work it is. So there's countless students out there that have you to thank for assistance with admissions and throughout that whole process.
And I couldn't have done it without the staff that I had who organized the files and kept kept things flowing as they should.
Yeah, yeah. I've tried to use this as an opportunity just to, there's a few names that you've mentioned today that are worth remembering. Stu Hiltz, and he was a cross appointment
Yes,
into planning for a while. George Brinkman, and you were a cross appointment over to ag economics.
I was, absolutely. Yes, yes.
And some of the, and I'll, as soon as you start mentioning staff names, one will leave out somebody you shouldn't have, but I'm thinking of Sue Hall, who is the graduate program assistant to you for so many years, and Sally Stoddard before her. And I'm not sure who I may have left out in that process, but
And
those,
Anna, of course.
and of course for her role with the administration of the school as a whole.
Right.
But again, the program has been so much more. It's the faculty, it's the students, but of course it's those important staff that have made things work over the decades.
They were able to smile and laugh at the appropriate times.
And working with faculty, that sometimes needs to happen.
It's important. It's important.
Indeed,
Absolutely.
it is.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, Harry, it's just been great to chat with you today, and I know former students and others will be just excited to hear from you in this way, and to hear some of the stories that you've had to share. Anything in conclusion you'd like to offer?
Just keep up the good work. I mean, I just believe in. I am a philosophical. I'm a person I like to be evidence based. So keep your values. Know what you are about in life, but make sure that you're keeping track of the evidence as well. Gather, and we hopefully we trained you as researchers, and you'll use those research skills to apply to your personal and professional lives as well. But always have your own values in mind.
Indeed. Well, that sounds like great advice. So thank you again, Harry. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, Wayne, for doing this.
Stay in touch.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.